Record. Like that. Okay, so once again, Alexander Ermenkov. I'm a ruling reality coach, and today's Friday, and we are having our reality talks with my today's guest, Dan LeFave. As he just explained to me, he's from Canada. He's strongly involved in to scaling up our reality. As I heard, he's primarily involved with scaling businesses, and I have a very nice, I don't know if it's strange, but an interesting idea about businesses as a whole, which I would like to discuss now with you, because when you speak about scaling businesses, in my reality, I view businesses and these so-called entities that we, the human beings, are creating as companies and big multinational companies or whatever, where all of us are putting our energy. They're invisible. We cannot see them, but they're actually helping all of us, the humanity. So they're something like tools for me, and they're some type of an entities where they're producing for us some beautiful things and products that we then consume, the human beings. So when you work with this type of companies, how do you divide between the human beings that are involved in the company and this invisible entity?
Well, yeah, like you're saying, they're two separate things. So they have a life, but they also have a business. Unfortunately, you see a lot of successful business owners, but not so many successful families and not so healthy business owners. So they have to, like I work on three pillars. So I work on their business, their health, and their relationships all at the same time. Because if you miss one of those, then there's a potential for divorce, heart attack, and bankruptcy. Those are the three pain points that can cause a lot of anxiety and stress. So I work on those three pillars because if something goes wrong with their health, then everything gets impacted. If something goes wrong with the relationships, then their health will likely get impacted, and that will affect their business. So there is a bit of a separation, but ultimately, like if somebody's coming to me to scale their business, they likely don't have massive health issues, because then they would be looking for a personal trainer or health coach or nutritionist or maybe a physician or something like that to help them. So I don't have people coming to me and saying, I want to scale my business, and by the way, I've had heart attacks and I'm at risk to to die soon or something. I've had people come to me that have cancer though, or just coming out of cancer, that have businesses, but for the most part, their relationships are okay, their health is okay, and then we're working on their business. But I will say this: every time I've helped somebody scale their business, they've released fat, they've lost weight, and every single one of them. And I didn't really notice it until after I was realizing, one client sent me a picture with his shirt off before and after, 36 pounds lighter. And then I started thinking, well, every client I've been working with is getting leaner and lighter. And I know that was part of their objective, but it wasn't like I'm not an expert on that. I can tell them how to go running and how to work out and how to eat because I practice those things, but they were all getting leaner and lighter. So I realized that in order to scale their business, they actually have to have more mental power, which means they have to put the right fuel in their gut in order to have the energy in their mind to do the work, and physically as well. So, but yeah, so that's how I look at it, because if I just say, hey, let's just work full tilt, no other focus on anything else, then things are going to fail. Relationships will go down, health will go down, and they'll burn out. Most people come to me when they are burning out, and so that's what I have to help them do, is get time and space so that they can work on their business instead of in it, and then they can start scaling. I'll just say one other thing. There's something called the vacuum law, or vacuum law of prosperity. Bob Proctor was my mentor, and we talked about that. If you think about your business in a vacuum, if you're trying to make it better, it's not about adding more stuff. It's not about doing more. It's actually about taking things out. So you grow by subtracting, taking things out instead of putting more in, because more in just means you have more responsibilities, you have more performance requirements and so on, and you have to produce more. So you take things away, take things out, and then you make space and time to do the work that you need to do. So that's the way I approach it. I think that, if you look at perfection, it's not about adding more. Perfection is about when you have nothing left to take away. That's perfection. So if people are, like yourself, maybe you like excellence, right? You want to be the best. So then it's not about adding more in. It's about when you have nothing left to take away. That's excellence, right? Like Roger Federer just retired. I mean, is that a business or life of excellence? Did he have an amazing career of excellence? Yeah. And, was there anything else he could take out or no, basically, or, he's done everything he could, right?
Yes. So actually, your idea is that when we take a lot of things out of us, then who is left?
Yeah. Well, it's about if we take everything out that we can, right? You remove things, you remove barriers, you remove inefficiencies, you remove maybe people, circumstances, events, environments. You just start taking things away. As an example, the guy that I told you about that lost 36 pounds, he has an auto detailing business, and he was trying to break $1 million, and he was getting close. And anyway, we started talking, and we realized quickly that his vision of his business 3 years from now had some missing links, and there were some people on his team that weren't a good fit. We compared his current business with his future business, and I said, "Who's not here in 3 years?" And he said, "There's 2 people." And then we got to work on that, and basically we found out what's an ideal employee for that position, and one employee got a real estate license and left, so he didn't have to even let them go. And then the other person, he gave them an opportunity to fix their issues, and they didn't. And there's a principle that how you do anything is how you do everything. So whatever they're doing is probably habitual, so they're not going to change. And so in the end, he got one, and he hired one person, and they handled both of those positions. He just paid them a little bit more, but that's removing weak links, people that aren't effective, right? And then it gives him more leverage. So otherwise,
a multiplication by subtraction.
yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, growth by subtraction or multiplicate. Yeah. So, when you simplify, you can multiply. Like that's the basic principle. So you can't multiply if you have issues, and, people, like he had people on his team that were complaining, blaming, crying, denying. They were victims. That's somebody who's got a victim consciousness. Yeah. They're not a producer. They're not going to be effective for the team. I mean, if you're trying to build a dream team, you can't have weak links and people on your team that are, that don't show up.
Yeah, and when I see how you're working with owners of companies and owners of business, for me personally, in this area of life, I'm very interested in what is actually the business transforming into, because for me personally, the business structure is something separate from the people, in a sense that for me, an owner is an owner, then the CEO and all the other roles that are played into a business, the chief visionary officers and all the people that are just developing and growing a company, and what they are creating of this company, so that people are attracted to give their best into this environment. This for me is what's important, what's interesting. For example, when you look in the Coca-Cola company, for example, a lot of people are going to have some negatives, some people are going to have some positives for the transnational companies, but actually, from my own personal observations, they're putting a lot of efforts into developing the people that are working for them. And you don't know who is the owner. a lot of people are the owners of these companies. Even for a lot of big multinational successful companies, we even don't know who are the CEOs, who are the people in the team, who are in the management board. We only track the shares. We only track the value. But what's behind the value of the company? Because it's not only the people. For me, I'm very interested in the culture, in these invisible things that are part of the company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But maybe,
Well, that's I think what you're alluding to is that if you're going to grow big, you have to have standards. You have to have guidelines that people follow, and it has to be from the leadership. It has to be from the person at the top. Nobody's going to do nobody's going to act or perform any better than the leadership, likely, unless they plan on taking over the leadership. But that's the thing. Like, so the leader has to set the standards. They have to have standards themselves. Unfortunately, there's probably so many companies around the world where the leaders don't necessarily have standards, and they can be paid or bought. They have a price. But if they had standards, then those are their commitments, and then the rest of the team and the organization follows.
yes, on one side, the standards, but on the other side, there are now companies that are 100 years old, 150 years old. They have built and compounded so many traditions, and they, for so long, have created something that whoever is coming to these companies, they need to comply with the traditions of the specifics of these long-term companies. Because if we focus only on the company as something always new, only a baby, only something that I need to develop, or the entrepreneur need to scale up to some degree, there are so many not only grown-up companies, but now very from the perspective of the human lifespan, 100, 150, 200-year-old companies, and they're still, of course, they're renewing all the time with the new things that are happening around us, but also they're keeping up to some traditions, maybe as you are calling standards, that they have created, and all the people in these companies are just complying to these standards. What do you think about this?
Well, I don't know. Like, I haven't analyzed big companies, but I'm assuming that yes. I mean, they're big enough that they have values, and they have mission statements and things like that. And I'm sure they're on the walls of all their businesses, and so people have to live and correspond with and cooperate according to those standards. So and that's I think what keeps them going. And the critical thing, though, is that when they have those standards, then everybody knows what the rules of the game are. They know what the rules of the business are. They know how they have to show up. They can't just operate and do whatever they like. Because emotions will go up and down, and when somebody's emotions are high and they're not feeling good, and they'll make mistakes. Like emotions are high, intelligence is low. That's what happens. People make mistakes when their emotions go really high. They say things and do things they don't actually mean, or and
Yeah,
so.
let's say in these big multinational companies, or in big established companies, how they non-stop sustain innovation, sustain growth, sustain all these things, so that they're able to extract them out of the human being, so that people that are working for such companies are just productive all the time, like let's say Google, Apple, and a lot of these tech companies that are really encouraging this atmosphere and culture of non-stop performance and creation.
So you're asking, how are they doing that, or what? Okay,
Yeah,
or
in a
what am I?
sense, how they're doing it and what type of conditions they're creating, so that people are willing to go into these states and flows to be so productive. And
Well, I think there's probably a number of things that they're doing, and I would have to say that for some of the big ones like Apple, Google, and so on. And I have a friend that works at Apple. Their environment is they set up their environment so that people can perform. It's like a high performance environment, and it might be the architecture, the layout, the way that people interact, the lack of doors and things like that. But environment plays a big role in how people perform and interact. There's a lot of research on it, and books like Atomic Habits, Tiny Habits, things like that. These are kinds of things that they probably implement at an early stage because they know that. I mean, look at Apple. The building's circular and they have this massive courtyard in the middle, right? What's that for? It's a massive gathering place for people to communicate and relate and be in nature, and eat their lunch, outdoors. So environment has a big role in how people function and operate. And even there's a company that they're not popular anymore, but back in the day, they were Nortel. I've been in their offices, and they had street signs throughout because, you could get lost in there. It was a massive place, but they had street signs. It was all open concept, and it's just a massive, like size of a football field or maybe multiple football fields. But environment does play a big role in how people perform, but also, the leadership team and the way they communicate, interact. I think that, once you start building a big company like an Apple or Coca-Cola or whatever, you are now attracting leaders, people that aspire to excellence. And, you're not going to get people that want to, skip off and stay home and call in sick. You just don't attract those kinds of people. Like my friend that works at Apple, he's a high performer. He shows up and he flies wherever they need him to fly and takes care of business, and whether he's dealing with people in Singapore, which is on a different time zone than he is in California, he's working. But I think they just by nature attract the kinds of people that they need. Plus they condition their environment, and then they set up all sorts of guidelines and values and mission statements and so on. I call them standards, but I don't think many people or many companies will have standards like I'm talking about, which is showing up on time and things like that. Those are sort of expected. But if that's part of the company standards, then that's what you put in the standards, and then you can actually, anybody on the team can actually call out anybody else about the standards. So if the boss didn't show up on time for a meeting, then somebody in the team can say, "Hey boss, by the way, that was one of our standards that you broke. You didn't show up on time," and then it's a team effort. So it's a different. There's a book called Team Code of Honor which teaches this. One of Robert Kiyosaki's advisors, Blair Singer, wrote that book, and so it's a great concept because when you have standards, people have to play at a high level, and if they can't handle it, they can't take the heat. They'll leave. They won't stay. Nobody will stay and be humiliated. They just won't.
So I'm very interesting. What type of people are attracted by such type of high standard communities or environment?
Well, there are people that like to perform at a high level, and they like to be involved in. I think they like to be involved in something big, and they like to contribute to something that's making a big difference in the world. So, if you want to go to a really deep level, I can almost bet that most of these people are traumatized to some extent. Like Gabor Mate, if you know who he is, he talks about big T, small t. So they're probably slightly traumatized or extremely, depending on their level of leadership. But they are high performers because they want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be validated. And so they'll step up and do that kind of thing. So, so that actually kind of brings an interesting perspective, which is, if you look at these big companies, they might be just offices full of highly traumatized people.
Yeah. So if we go back to the individual level where it's our own realities and our daily performances, the problem with us or with me or with you is that we need to create our own standards in which we to perform. We are the one that observe what we are doing and so on. So how are you doing it in your daily reality, all this construction, and how you follow all your principles, how you are constructing all your high standard environment, so to say, in your personal life?
Well, it starts with creating your personal standards. So, and these are not like, it's not a long list. It's only like 10 to 15 standards that you're creating. So you start by creating these standards for yourself by thinking about what are your non-negotiables? Like, what would you not live without, right? And you start there. So one of my standards is that I always surround myself with people who ask more of me than I ask of myself. That's a standard that I aspire to. And so when I go to meet people, then I'm gauging our conversation and our future relationship based on that standard. And so I have my standards, they're on my desk, and I keep them there all the time. And so I'm constantly reminded of my standards, and I get to know them. Like I just recited that one, I didn't have to look it up. I know what it is. I also have standards with other people. I'm in a reading mastermind. We read every day. So one of our standards is I always show up to calls with a positive attitude because my attitude determines my success. Well, if one of us shows up and we're in a bad mood, we can say, hey, seems like you're in a bad mood. And they'll probably grumble back, right? And then you just say, okay, well, let's end the call and we'll start again tomorrow. But so to answer your question, I have my standards written down. I keep them present where I can see them. And then I'm gauging my interactions with people throughout the day and throughout my week and month that, am I meeting my standards? Am I living by my standards? And if you want to go to deeper levels, you have standards with your family. So you have personal standards. Then you have standards with your family, and you have standards with your business, maybe standards with your executive team if you have that. And so once you have those standards set up, now you have like a really solid foundation that you can build on.
So actually, in a sense, I have two questions. One question is, does the standard limit you? And they do it on purpose, of course. And then, which is more important, the vision or the standards?
I don't know that one is more important than the other. I think they work together because the vision is what your future identity, your personal identity, but also the identity of your business and the identity of your team and your employees, right? So it goes hand in hand. But when you have the standards, then it's like, okay, you want to be on the team? Great. Here's our standards. And anybody that comes in must agree to the standards. If they don't agree to something, or if there's something like, oh, I have troubles showing up to work on time, and that goes against one of the standards, then the hiring process stops right there. But anybody who's on the team, you would have to negotiate the standards with them, get their buy-in. They have to agree to the standards, and then you build them together. But once you have those standards, then they feed the vision. The vision is the future. The standards are the policies that you live by day to day. The future vision, you need that. That's something you're aiming for. But standards keep people operating at a high level. It creates a really strong team. And when you have a team that's strong, virtually it's unbreakable. Because everybody's communicating at a high level. They know they're at all at the same play. They're playing at the same level because it doesn't matter where they are in the business. But if they make a mistake, anybody on the team can say, you made a mistake. How do we fix it now? It's a team effort. It's a team code, a team standard. And you say, okay, how do we fix it now?
And where then, because sometimes the standards can become a hiding part and people cannot show up authentical. So can we sometimes go into a culture and an atmosphere because of the high standards? Actually, people cannot be authentic, or how these two things go together, authenticity and standards?
No, it's always going to bring out their authenticity. It always will. Like how somebody is how they are, right? Like their habits, their beliefs, their practices. I mean, if they could fake it and not get sick, fine, but I doubt it. I would say over a period of time, if somebody is basically faking it and trying to play a role that they're not, they're eventually going to leave. They won't be able to handle it. High performers know this. Like, if you've ever been on a team, like a sports team, and you're playing with high performers, and somebody comes on the team, well, they can't fake being good, right? Right. But at the same time, you would see somebody's performance breaking down. If they're faking it, their performance isn't going to be high. They're not motivated, right? Progress is motivation, right? So if you can see that somebody's not progressing, well, then guess what? They're not motivated. If they're faking, then you can call it out. You can say, is this the right place for you? Is this the right team? Because you want to have a really solid team that's working together, and there's harmony, there's flow, and it's a work in progress. It's constant adjustments, little adjustments here and there. But I've seen this where people are working in companies. They're not ready for the level of work that is being asked of them, and they can't fake it. Because you see it in the results, you see it in their numbers, you see it in their performance. So it doesn't work that way. Like, again, it's a team effort though. So everybody's collectively working together. Nobody's trying to blame or point fingers at anybody. It's like, if something goes wrong, there's a mistake, they call it out. And now they say, okay, as a team, how are we going to solve this? As a team, not, hey, John made a mistake, you better fix that, or else you're out of here. No, it's like, that was a mistake. How can we fix this so it doesn't happen in the future? And maybe it means another standard is created. Standards are equal to commitments. So it's people's commitments that are being created here.
Yeah, because more of the tendencies that I observe are that actually all around me, everything is lowering the standards or is broadening the standards. If you today ask, okay, I would like only good people around me. What is the today's meaning of good? What is your definition of good person?
Yeah, well, again, it's not necessarily like good or bad, or a high performer or not. It's about what are the non-negotiable standards in a business, and depending on what the business is, one standard might be like the team comes before everything else. Some people might say, no, my family comes before my team and my job. But if that was the standard, then people who came in would have to say, or they'd have to be in agreement with that. Like, I'm going to put the team and the company and the business first, barring any emergencies. But I'm going to, if everything is okay at home, I'll work, overnight if I have to, or whatever the case may be, if that was the standard, so, standards are creating a strong foundation. It's trying, you're building a dream team. Like, if you're building a big company, you have there's a lot of people involved, and there's a lot of mistakes that can happen. And if a mistake happens twice, it's a habit. Okay, so do we want, does the company want to have people on their team that's making habitual mistakes? That's costly. And, if you think about what Charlie Munger says, the first rule of compounding, never interrupt it unnecessarily. Well, if compounding is working in the right direction, great. But if there's habits of mistakes happening, that's going to also take you down, right? Like, you want, let's use numbers. Let's say you're going from 100 million to 150 million. Well, you get a 50% gain and you go to 150 million. But guess what? A 33% loss takes you back down to 100 million. So, it doesn't take much. The losses will cut into your gains. Like, you don't need a 50% loss to go down to 100. You just need 33, right? So, it's that kind of thought process that it builds big companies and strong teams.
And for example, because in my own company, we're approximately 30 people, and we are not constantly, but monthly, we are creating some educations and mindset expansion of thinking and so on with them. But what do you think is the dream level of interaction, of non-stop preparation of this type of people? Because in order, when you say, okay, these are the standards, you need to constantly nourish these people in order they to non-stop conform to the standards and to be able to perform. So should they be non-stop educated or encouraged, or how do you, when you work with businesses, how do you construct this type of educational culture, or you work primarily with the owners of the company?
Well, whether it's with the owners or not, it's still the same. The standards, once they're created, need to be visible. So they need to be visible. They could be on multiple walls in the place of business. Definitely, if there's a meeting room, on the wall in the meeting room, right, and then everybody knows what the standards are. Those are the codes, right? That's how we're operating here. And then it's not a blaming; it's a collaborative effort. It's like if a code is broken or a standard is broken, just look up at the wall and then say, okay, that standard was broken. How can we collectively work together to solve this? Is there something we can do to help you so that this doesn't get repeated? And once you call it out, then you know what you can do to fix it. But those standards need to be part of the culture. So they're present. People can read them. They can see them. It depends on how, what level they want to go to emphasizing them. Like I said, I'm in this mastermind. I've been reading every day for 30 minutes for it's 11 years next month. So we have a code. And what do we do when we start the call? We read the code together. So I won't bore you, but I could tell you what my standards are for that mastermind. And, because I've memorized it, I've said it over, I've said it thousands of times. I don't expect, employees of a company to do that, but they should know them well enough that when they're going to do something, in their mind, they're like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to be called out on that. And I don't want to be humiliated. So I'm not going to do it. I'm going to fix it and do it right or whatever.
So in the sense, are the standards something like affirmation, or in this case, because if you repeat it every morning, what does this repetition makes to your brain and to your mind? It's conditioning you.
They could be affirmations. I wouldn't necessarily classify them as an affirmation, because an affirmation is about an intention of some kind. These are intentions, but they're more or less, they are policies, is what they are. So they're boundaries of performance. So it keeps people operating at a certain level. So if you're growing a business and you want to continue growing and you want to attract higher quality people, then you have a list of standards that people need to operate under. And it could be, again, simple things like showing up to meetings on time. And, if that's a non-negotiable, in certain businesses, that might be an issue. Just because of the culture of the business, maybe showing up on time is not a requirement or something, or an expectation. But, like it sets the expectation high so that, let's say you were hiring me and you started interviewing me, and then you showed me your list of standards, and I'm like, oh, there's at least 2 or 3 of those that I probably would have a hard time with. Well, that I'm not going to be a good part of your team then, right? So it basically tightens things up. But in terms of affirmations, I know what affirmations are and I've practiced them, but these standards are similar in nature. But basically they are full-on commitments and they are non-negotiable. These are things that are part of the business, part of the culture. I mean, let's take one, for example, Amazon. Mm-hmm. Customer service. That's what Bezos started with, customer service. And it's still the same thing. I know it. Why? Because if something's not right for me, I can return it. No problem. No questions asked. They just take it back. Just print the label, ship it back. So that was one of his standards. That's his highest standard. And so if anybody comes in the company and doesn't believe in high customer service and catering to the customer, and maybe even the customer is always right type mentality, they're not right for the business. they'll leave.
Can you share with us what type of standards you are following, or with this group, or some personal standards, just to know? And for me, it's also interesting, and for the audience, maybe just to know what are the practical applications, how you put this type of standards, because I haven't heard a lot of people that are just using them on a daily basis. In today's society, it's 100% the opposite.
I
No
know.
standard is the new normal.
Right. Yeah. And that's the problem, right? Because then guess what? People will play their own game. They will do whatever is comfortable for them. So, and I hear it. I have a friend who's a dentist, the same thing. He has an office and he said he needed a hygienist to come in and he was going to tell them what the rate of pay is and everything. And before he had an opportunity, they said, here's what I need to get paid. Here's my hours and here's how much time I need off.
The worker has standards nowadays.
Yeah, she had her standards and told him, and then he either could accept it or, and in this marketplace, he had to accept it, you know? So, but you're asking about, like I've named a couple of my standards. One is, always showing up. Well, always showing up to calls on time is one of the standards that I have with Mark. And also, surrounding myself with people that ask more of me than I ask myself. One of our reading masterminds is showing up to calls with a positive attitude, because our attitude determines our success. So these are relatively broad, but they get the job done. Like if there's anything that goes against that, then we get to call it. And there have been times when I've got on a call and I said, Mark, sounds like you're in a bad mood, and he grumbles a little bit, and then I just say, well, let's just hang up and talk tomorrow. That's it. But in terms of businesses, it all depends on what their product is and their service and so on. But typical things that are non-negotiables, like showing up to meetings on time, maybe performing at a high level, things like that, like things that call out people's potential faults. Like, you want to call out people's habits by creating these standards. And so once a company has standards, which, like you're saying, most don't, guess what? Then they're open to a lot of mistakes and a lot of problems, a lot of issues. And, I think that bottom line is, when you don't have standards, you can be bought. So we see that happening now. So people don't have standards. They go into a company. The company says, hey, thanks for coming. Great. You're part of the team. Can you stay here at least 5 months? Yes. And then somebody else comes along and says, here, we'll pay you 50% more. And then they say, I'm leaving. Or they just call in and say, sorry, right? But they said yes to 5 months, but that really wasn't a commitment, right? They didn't have a standard. They don't have a personal standard that says, I honor my word, I keep my word. So, and that's what happens then. So if you think about it, if you don't have standards, then everybody has a price. You just have to name the price. And there's research on this. There's actually studies that there's a program on it where people were sitting down in an outdoor cafe, and the person across from them, they said, do you have a religious belief? Yes, I do. All right, good. If I gave you 100 euros, would you say you didn't believe in God? No. Okay. How about 250 euros? No. 300? No. Okay. How about 800? Okay. and then, so guess what? They have a belief, but the money broke their standard. There was a price that they would, and it's not always money, but they were able to be bought, right? And so, and I hear you. Most people don't have standards. We look at companies that go down, Lehman Brothers or whatever, they didn't have standards. Because if they did, they wouldn't have done what they did, right? Or even if you know Bill Bartman, he had the biggest company for collections, and his partner did something fraudulent. Why? No standards. And then guess what? The whole business gone. And even the judge told him, you can only have so much real estate now, and they actually had to cut off part of his house, so with saws. Yeah. So yeah. Why? Because his partner didn't have standards, and he did, right? And so he did some fraudulent things, and the billion-dollar business went down the drain. That was it.
Mm.
So
So actually, standards are helping us to hold in our personal experience everything that we are willing to sustain within these standards. So actually, standards are creating for us the boundaries in which we are just having our experience and performance, or how we can say it. Because what's the difference between being within standards and being without standards? It looks like to be without standards is more freedom.
well,
Because people can say, well, these standards are limiting me. I'm so much better than your standards.
right. Well, you think about it. Well, yeah, it doesn't limit freedom. It actually creates more freedom, because then it creates it. People know what the rules are and how to play, right? So, we don't think of like standards are systems. It's a system, right? I mean, if the weather patterns around the world changed, and it just shifted by like 2 degrees, we've only had shifts of temperature changes about 1 or 2 degrees over the past 10,000 years. If it shifted more, a lot of us would be dead, because we can't handle changes like that. So standards keep you on the same path, keep you on the same train of thought. And yes, they are boundaries, they are policies. And guess what? People respond to policies. So if somebody calls me now and they get my voice message, it will say, I check messages between 11 a.m. and 4 and 5 p.m., between 11 and 12 and 4 and 5. If you're calling me outside of those times, go ahead and leave a message. However, if this is urgent, go ahead and text me. Those are my standards for people calling me. Why? Because I have a schedule that I keep and I maintain, and I don't need to be answering calls anytime, any place. So, once you create policies and boundaries, then people know how to operate and can communicate with you. Same thing with the leadership of a team or a company. If people came and interrupted them all the time, knocking their door, every time, the distraction, how many minutes does it take to get back on track to what you're doing? Like, get your thoughts back to focus. It could take minutes, could take 20 minutes. There's a lot of research on that. So instead, you let your team know when you're available, and then they now play at a higher level. They know when they can interact with you and ask you questions. It's not a whimsical environment where they just do whatever, whenever, when the time is right. So, that doesn't work. Like, think about it. Somebody who works as an employee, they go home after work. If the boss is calling them after work and getting them to do work, that's probably going against their own standards. They probably have a standard like, I'm at home. This is personal time, family time. You can't interrupt that. I'm on vacation. So we have hidden, standards that, we don't talk about, but they're there. So they're there for people when they're not at work. So why not have them while they're at work? So then you create a really strong team. No business can grow big unless they have these standards, these policies. If they don't, it might, they might luck out. but I think once you have something like this, then people know what the rules are, what the guidelines are, and what's expected. And they will not stay if they can't handle it, which is great, because then now you're really building a strong team. Like, nobody's going to come into an environment and be a weak individual and carry on without noticing they're making mistakes. Unless they're narcissist, they're they're going to notice their performance is not there, and they'll probably compare themselves against others, and then eventually they'll leave. They'll have to go to another team, another environment where they can perform at a low level. That's okay.
So where are the low standard level people working there?
I don't know. I don't talk to those companies, but I'm sure they're out there, right? But or maybe they probably don't last very long. Why? Because they have people that are taking things down. It doesn't work in this environment. Like, if people have low standards and low capabilities, what's going to happen over time? If people lie, steal, and cheat, and don't keep their word, do you think a business will thrive? Not likely. I mean, maybe if you're in the drug dealing business, I don't know, but I don't know. I've never helped a drug dealer grow their business, and I wouldn't.
And they have a very strong code, so I'm not sure that
No,
they have standards. They have very high standards.
they can sell for sure. Those dealers, they're probably the best salespeople in the world, but I don't think you'd want to hire them necessarily.
So doesn't actually life look hard when you have very high and strict standards?
No, not if you're a high performer and that's your aspiration. Like think about it. Like again, we talked about Roger Federer. Do you think he'd have anybody on his team who wasn't a high performer? He had Yvonne Lendl. He had other people. He had really high performing people, and he hung around with Rafael and Nadal and Djokovic. I mean, he surrounded himself with the greatest people. Nobody, if I went to him and said, "Hey, Roger, saw you play. Maybe we could just go have a little round." I was going to be like, no, it's going to be boring. Like, and plus, who are you? Right? So if there's nothing, if I don't have anything to offer, I've had people, that I've talked to before, called them up. They had their number online, and I found them, and I called them, and I said, "Hey, I have some ideas that could help grow your business." And it's a guy in Hawaii, and he said, "Are you a millionaire?" And this is years ago, and I said, "Not yet." And he said, "Well, when you are, well, let's talk." That was his standard. He'll talk to millionaires, and he'll help them and listen to them. So no, it doesn't cause any problems. It actually makes things better. It's probably not fun at first, especially for an existing organization. Why? Because people are going to leave, and business owners do not want people leaving because that's a real tough time. You have to now hire new people and find new people and train them and so on. And so, but listen, I've talked to business owners where they say to me, "I'm never going to let anybody go. I've worked with these people for 7 years. I know them, and I'm never." And then a little, few weeks down the road, month down the road or whatever, they're like, "Man, if this guy doesn't perform, I have to let him go." I'm like, "Really? I thought you were never going to let anybody go." Right? Why? They're now playing at a higher level. Their business needs to grow. It's their business that's the focus, not being nice and being a charitable organization, right? That's inviting anybody in that's going to come in and perform at whatever level they want. There's exceptions. Then every time you have zero standards, there's exceptions. There's always an exception, right? It's like, I'm not feeling well, or this went wrong, or that went wrong, right? And then after a dozen excuses, as a leader, like if you're running that business, you're like, this isn't working, right? And so if you have standards, then guess what? It calls people out right away, and you waste less time. You don't have people coming in that waste your time and take your time and suck your energy, and then they leave faster. So it just gets you going faster.
I mean, the way I'm doing it in my own business, we are very good with the people, and we have people that are not performing according to our standards, for example. Mm-hmm. And we don't have people that are leaving our company. Nobody's willing to leave for a lot of years, even. And we didn't know what to do, because we don't want just to move them away because they're not according to the standards. But we are trying to help them. We are trying to educate them more and more, because we want to work a little bit, if possible, with compassion. A lot of time it's not possible. We have changed 4 or 5 people during the last year, but now we are creating more and more processes around people, so that if they cannot perform little by little, the processes are just taking them away of the business, so to say. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, this is not like that it is something that is hard, but I'm still wondering how we can build more and more high conscious company, in the sense that the people are willing actually from the inside out to keep standards and to perform, not necessarily just to, because if you put the standards and you say, okay, Are you going to use, for example, in my company, the standards is that every person need to work in his area of business in such a way that every month we have at least 60 new clients in his area. And if he performs from 60 to 100, he is a good performer. If we have 2 or 3 people that sometimes are performing 20 per month, new clients. And this is 3 times lower than the other person, and so on and so on. And still we believe that there is something in every human being, and that you can not change it from the external part of the equation, but at least how long can you give such type of people time and so on, or they are just created for something else, because then we go to like this Indian caste society. High standard people, middle standard people, and low standard people. Or is this the way, like it is like some type of societies where it's a little bit utopian, where all people are just ordered around the standards they're keeping, and different level of consciousness or standards or the way they perform, because not everyone is performing the same way, because they have different personalities. Some people are good performers in one area, some other people are more artists. So if all the companies are just seeking for high performers, a typical type of persons, then aren't we going to create some type of a standardized humanity that is keeping just some standards?
No, but you think about it, like, as an example, I use sports as an example because if you've ever played a sport, I played ice hockey. So when I joined a team and we were high performers, we would stick together and we would challenge each other and even compete amongst each other a little bit. So it creates this culture of raising the bar and raising the bar and raising the bar. So and I don't know if you agree with the principle that how people do anything is how they do everything. So basically, if somebody does something once or twice, that's how they're going to do everything. So if somebody lies once or twice, and it doesn't matter how big or small the lie is, they have the capability of lying. They have that in them. They will lie if they are pressured. So, if the standard in your business is that people tell the truth and follow through, well, guess what? Anybody lies, and it doesn't matter at what level, that's an indication of their personality. And
but how can you work in the marketing teams and tell the truth? One of the dreams of my daughter, when she was 12 or 11, 12 years old, she said, one day I want to become a marketing expert because I want to manipulate people. Then later on, she grew a little bit, and now she's in psychology. But for her, this is the marketing. It manipulates people to convince them to buy.
well, that's one perspective, but the other, I think of marketing that you're looking for people who want what you're offering. You're not trying to sell people something that don't want what you're offering, because guess what that's going to create? It's going to create some bad emotions out there and bad feelings. So, but you're likely correct. In the marketplace, there are things being sold that people don't need, and they're being sold on things. That's not the marketer's fault, right? They're doing their job. They're promoting. They're selling. That's what they're there to do. People are making decisions. Like if I go to a shopping mall and somebody markets me extremely well, I'm still making a decision to buy. It's not them. I'm not being forced. They didn't put a gun to my head and say, buy that or else I'm going to kill you. So I have the option.
Yes, but if you are educating yourself a little bit the next time, and you know that he made 5 or 6 specific tricks upon your mind that made you buy, what are you going to say the next time when you are more aware?
Well, I am aware now because I'm in the world of marketing, online marketing. So when I see people marketing and I see the offer coming, and I see them presenting an offer to me, I'll literally call it out. I'll say, "This sounds like an offer," or "It looks like an offer to me." Right? I'll just say it, and then it's out there, right? It's not like, hey, would you like to have a chat? No, it's like, would you like to have a chat? And I'm going to try and sell you what I'm promoting. Yes, that's the truth, right? So I just call it out if I need to, but most times you can just ignore it. But marketing, no, marketing doesn't have to be manipulation, and it can be honest and honorable. The bottom line is, if you're trying to build a really strong team, a tight knit team, then you have to have some baseline that everybody's operating from. And that's what standards and commitments do. They get people playing at a high level together, but it's a team effort. And what you mentioned earlier about people that keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again, well, you give them an opportunity. With Brad, with his auto detailing business, he gave his employee 3 weeks to see if he would solve his problem. It had been going on for years, but he gave him 3 weeks. He had a dialogue, talked about the fixing it. He gave him 3 weeks, nothing changed. So then in that case, he said, okay, sorry, this isn't working. You have to go. And that's the bottom line. Like, if you're trying to build the best team, like, think of it like a dream team, and if you've ever been on a dream team or some sort of sporting team where people are extremely good at what they do, they're not going to let anybody on the team that's extremely weak. And also, people have habits, beliefs, and practices that are part of them. Would you agree? Like, it's their.
Uh, yes, to some extent, but also when I was speaking with people and when I was in the strategic coaching community within the last year, I asked the same question, and they say, well, Alex, if you want to build a dream team, you need to create environment of a dream team company.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm a dream team person, I want to go into a dream team company. So at least, for example, if you want to play hockey with, and you know that in the other hockey team, it's 3 very good players, you want to join.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to start somewhere. You need to have some good players already in your company, or the owner of this hockey team is very strong, or the trainer is very good. So it's very important, the chief operating officers and the executive officers, to be really inspiring people, to know where they're going, to know the direction, the culture, to be encouraging this type of dream team people to be part of such a company. This is also important, because otherwise they're not coming.
Yes. Well, and the thing is, like, if somebody doesn't have their own standards or disciplines that they operate under, if they weren't disciplined at a young age, then they're not going to be disciplined themselves. And unless they raise their hand and say, I want to improve, and then take action to make that change, nothing's going to happen. Nobody can be forced to change. We know that. We've couples have tried to change relationships, and maybe companies have tried to change their employees and given them opportunity to fix their issues and so on. No, like, if somebody doesn't say, I want to, they're motivated intrinsically, internally, they're not going to. No leader can cause anybody to change. There might be motivation, though, if they said, hey, unless you fix that, unless you pick up your socks and pick up the slack and start performing, you're gone. Then there might be a motivation. Then they start doing something about it. But if there's no motivation, like no pressure of any kind, then all they're going to do is go and find another team, go and join another company where they can perform at the same level that they did before, and stay comfortable. That's it. Today's society and today's culture is, I want to be comfortable, and I want to determine and specify how I'm going to operate and do what I do and the way I do it and so on. And, that's a recipe for disaster. So, you think about it, like, how can you rely on that? How can you rely on people coming in that are making mistakes and performing at low levels and getting all emotional? Just, it's not reliable. I have one client, his accountant, total emotional wreck, and would call in sick whenever, and take days off and all sorts of, and you can't dispute that. The labor laws protected her, but at some point, she's just a weak link, like a really weak link. Like you can't, if you're building that dream team, you have to keep the focus on the dream team, or you run a charitable business where you let people come in that, can perform at a low level, and you accept them. You're like, I know not everybody's perfect. That's, like you think Elon, Starlink, and all these businesses, you think he's letting people in that are going to whittle away at his empire? No.
But that's why sometimes coming big complaints from former workers that they didn't felt comfortable while working in such environment.
They probably didn't have any standards though, which is now they didn't know what they were doing and what the rules were. Like that's part of the issue, right? Like there's no guidelines, there's no baseline that people can operate from.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, for me, it's a personal issue, because if I'm rising, for example, in my company, more and more the standards, actually, am I allowed to make people to improve, or to ask from them to raise the standards, or to improve, or to perform? I mean, it's so difficult because you cannot quantify a lot of this inner energy of every worker, and just to pressure them, because if you pressure them, they cannot perform. So it's a little bit different, and I don't know, because maybe in your type of environment it is easy, but with us in our type of environment in our countries here in Europe, the workers have more, they're so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not so easy to ask the worker to do more and more and more. I mean, we're just trying to do it the opposite, not by a push strategy, but by pull strategy, by just creating a better environment so they're willing to perform better in order to receive more money, for example. But the problem is that from one level forward, people don't want more money. They're satisfied.
Money is not necessarily a driver. Everybody has a love language if you've studied that kind of work. So everybody has a love language. So I actually help businesses find out what their employees' love languages are.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's valuable because they may not want or need more money, but they may, it might be words of affirmation or gifts or something that motivates them. So you find out what motivates them, and then you cater to that. But also, again, we're talking, your business is existing. So the standards would have to be built probably with, not just with one team, but probably multiple teams, and they would build them themselves. And with the leader in that, area of your business. So they would build it together with the intent of building a stronger team. That's it. It's not like nobody's being pushed or forced. That's not at all. It's pulling everybody up to a higher level, helping people to play at a higher level. So, you're looking for people that want to play at a higher level. Like they would actually feel motivated playing at a higher level, and motivated being in an environment where people are playing at a higher level. That excites them. That's what you want to tap into, right? So people that are getting frustrated and angry and upset and disappointed and depressed, they're not going to perform at a higher level. They're a weak link in their business. And so it's about establishing that framework, that foundation with the teams, whatever number of teams there are, and then they get to do, like the marketing team isn't going to operate the same as the accounting team. Like, the standards are probably going to be different, right? Like you said, like marketing is a different breed of person in how they operate. They're more creatives and so on. So you can't give them standards that somebody in accounting who's very linear, logical, you can't have the same standards. They're going to clash. Everybody would leave basically. So you're going to have standards based on different environments, and then those are people's commitments. But the objective is to get to a level where people are in harmony and flow, things are performing, and then you can make little subtle adjustments and improvements if you want. But now you have a solid foundation. You have a solid team, a culture of people that are performing at a high level, and there might be a little friendly competition there, and that keeps people, keeps them motivated and excited. Like you can't do something for 10 years day in day out and not get bored. So,
And then I at least I'm surrounded with such type of people that are almost all of them are dreaming just to leave their jobs and to create their own businesses because they don't want to just comply with anybody else's standards or any other culture or company standards. They just want to create something of their own. This is a very strong movement now. Almost every worker is dreaming to be one day his own.
well, while they're with you, perform at a high level. That's all. Yeah, I say great. Uh, I'd love to have some competition, and maybe you can do exactly what I'm doing someday. But for now, let's just perform at a high level. You can learn what you can and learn what you can do here. And yeah, maybe in 5 or 10 years, you'll be ready to, or less or whatever, you'll be ready to take that leap. And I'll encourage you to. Why not? Work with them. Say, yeah, fine, you should have your own business. But for the time being, I would learn what you can here, unless you want to go join some other team, right? So it's being honest, right? Like that's the whole thing. It's telling the truth. That's what it is in the end. It's just calling people out, saying, hey, how do you perform? I've had friends that have, one of my friends has 4 plants. He has 4 factories, and he has 200 plus employees or whatever. So he's asking me the question, what motivates you? Why do you aspire to higher levels and work so hard and everything? And I'm like, I don't really know exactly why. It's just, could be a number of things. I had a near death experience when I was a kid. Maybe that's the factor, or maybe it was my dad because we had a butcher shop and we worked hard, and I don't know. Or it's just it's just about self improvement and being better and stronger. But it's part of me. So if I go into an environment, they should expect that. I've gone into environments where they said, "Hey, calm down, don't do as much," and I'm like, okay. Might be hard, but I probably could do it, and I had to. I had to tone it down because they were just like they didn't, they don't work that fast in that environment. So I had to actually, tone down my performance and the level of play, and that's So then in the end, I left that environment. I left that team. I couldn't perform there, and I went to another one, and then they let me do whatever the heck I wanted to, and then I was able to generate like $10 million in revenue over a period of years because they just let me run things the way I wanted to and fine tune and whatever. But I didn't know about standards then, so if I had of, I might have, you know. But I created standard processes for sure. All those processes are still in place. They're still probably improved, but they're still in place 10 years later, and they're probably 10, $15 million in revenue more now, and so but.
So can we say actually that if you want to outperform your competition, or even if you want to outperform something in life, actually you need to outperform it with better standards that you are implementing in your life? Is it approximately this that?
Yes, you need to know. It starts with your own personal standards. Once you know your personal standards, then you can build standards with others, whether it's family or team. But yes, once you have standards and you start playing to that high level, then you have leverage, right? There's leverage there, and that's the kind of leverage that will help grow a really strong team. And then guess what? The marketplace is going to look at you as the example and try to hack you and hack your system and find out what's Alex doing? Why are they so strong and so big and growing? And they have these magnificent events outdoors and like I have a friend, he has a real estate business. I don't know if they have standards necessarily, probably because he's big in mindset and so on. But he has events like at Atlantis in Bahamas, and the whatever 150 people. He has thousands of agents working in his business, but 150, 200 people come out there to celebrate and get little trophies for their performance for the year. Some of them win like $100,000 for performing at a high level or whatever. But it's probably a business that he's built it on standards. Maybe not physical standards that are present and visible, but I think that's more valuable. Like, as an example, there's a tire company. Here's a good example. I don't know the name of the company, but they're like maybe an auto repair tire. Maybe it's a tire company, they sell tires. And they have all of their policies about how they perform with their customers on the wall, right there as soon as they come in, big lettering on the wall. Guess what? Anybody who walks through the door and sees that says, I'm going to buy tires from this guy. I'm not even going down the road to compare prices. Never mind. Look at the promise they're making, right? That's a commitment, a promise. So, you think about it. Like, what if it was, what if hiring people was like a marriage, right? Some people take a long time to get married. They date and so on. They get to know each other. They go traveling together and they meet each other's families and so on. There's all this assessment and testing and trial and error and find out who they really are, right? All that.
You mean 3 job interviews or 5 job interviews?
I don't think it needs to be that many. And actually there's some great research. A friend of mine has a business where they ask questions that tells you how your employee's mind is wired, your potential employee. So it tells you how their mind is wired. They ask binary questions. The questions were designed by PhD, so this is not like a simple process, but they're binary questions. And these binary questions give that company the little bits of information that tells them who you are. So I remember one of the questions, because I went through it. It said, would I rather sell cars or study law books? And I thought to myself, neither. But I had to pick one. So I said, I do not like studying and reading boring law books, so I'll go sell cars. And I sold meat in a butcher shop as a kid, so I can probably sell cars. So, these are binary questions, but it tells you how you're wired. It's not a personality test. It's like, how is their mind wired? How do they think? Guess what? I'll ask questions of people if I'm going to hire them. What was their childhood like? What was their schooling like? How did they have to perform at school? Did they have to be all A's? What was like around their house, right? I'll even ask some questions like, if they're driving in their car, are they driving the fast lane or the slow lane? These are little questions that give me little insights about people. Even if I ask somebody to write a letter E on their forehead, if they write it facing themselves, they're more internal. They think about themselves and they don't think, they're not maybe as compassionate or whatever. Like, you can ask all sorts of questions, but anyway, the point is, there is a system out there that is way better than personality tests, and it tells you how people's minds are wired. So then you can cut to the chase. But also, I do this with clients. I get them, they always tell me what they don't like about their employees. And I said, great, make a list of that. And I said, what would you like then? They make the list of that. And I said, okay, let's create an avatar. That's who you're going after now. Let's go find that person. I think like a hunter. My dad was a hunter. If we were out there, shotguns in hand, and we have a slug in the gun, just for reference. A slug is one bullet versus pellets, which is for duck hunting. If a duck flew out of the pond, am I going to shoot that slug at it? No. It's a waste of a bullet, and I might scare deer away. No. So I'm hunting. I use that hunter mentality, create an avatar, create a clear picture of what you want, and then now go hunting for it. Women do it with dress shopping. Right? You know it, right? Yeah. They would need a dress. They know exactly where to go. Head into the mall or head into this shop. They know. And then there's going to be something there that I'm going to love, right? They get it.
This is their type of hunting.
That's right. They hunt for dress. We hunt for animals. So, anyway, yeah, this is my perception and my focus. But I think that, if emotions are going to be high, intelligence is going to be low. When emotions go up, and people problems are the biggest issue businesses have, because you can rely on people being unpredictable. they will be unpredictable at some time in the future. So why not create a system so that they can be more predictable? That's all.
Mm, yeah, this is good. So I don't know. I mean, I personally, I think that if I implement more and more of such type of standards, though we are doing it anyhow, intentionally, some of them, because we see that this is very important. Paradoxically, the mind thinks that you are actually going to even scare some people, and it will not be so easy to find good people. But
I know
maybe,
that's the fear. That's the fear,
maybe
right?
it's the opposite, because people say, wow, these people are really serious about what they're doing. If they
Yeah.
really are seeking for such type of person, and am I such a type of person? Am I going to be challenged for this
Yeah.
type of job? Yeah, maybe.
Well, and you'll start attracting people that want to play at a high level. They're going to look at your business and say, look at those high performers. And they get paid more. And I'm over here with these guys, and then I can't handle it. I can handle it over there, right? I'd rather be in an environment where they have standards and maybe there's a little competition and pressure, and I can thrive there, right? So you get to decide, right? Are you building a dream team or not, right? And so if it's a dream team you want, then you have to establish standards and practices and policies and principles that people can aspire to, and then you have the dream team. Like if you look at any team, doesn't matter if it's basketball, soccer, football, hockey, whatever, those teams are in harmony and in flow, and they're the best players in the league. How do they come together? Not by accident. Right, the coach made it happen, the leadership of the team, and the investment that was made, right? They paid for those players, right? So that's it. Like that's the way it works. And you might have to pay for high players. Like I told you, the guy in real estate, he pays for high standard players. He gets the best. He finds the best. He gets the best. He sets them up and puts them to work in his environment. And they're performing at a high level, and they can't stop. They love it, right?
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
it. So, you know. Anyway,
Yeah.
not going to work for everybody, but
A lot of people are, not a lot, but some people are really scared from this high performance mentality.
yeah.
Everybody is just dreaming for something calm, lake, a fish, and just doing
Then go and get a job working on the lake then, or whatever, right? But like, look, in 5 minutes I have a call with somebody, and we are measuring our performance together. I use a planner, this 12-week planner, and he and I are going to get on a call, and we're going to look at our performance together and see how, and be accountable to each other. That's what standards will do. It'll help people be accountable to the team, because it's never going to be one person against another or the boss blaming somebody. It's always going to be, hey, that was a code 8. One of the standards was broken. Yeah, we know that. Okay, good. What can we do to fix it now? We, as a team, do I have to come and pick you up in the morning, so you show up in time? I can do that. You're down the road, no problem. Okay, just little things like that. I had to do these kinds of things when my brother and I we were building a business in wireless telecom and construction. Like, how are we going to get people to perform at a high level and everything? I had to, I'm not an expert at this, but I ended up setting up the tool bins and boxes in the back of the truck, on a 2x10 and all this, just getting them all organized so nothing was lost anymore, and had a whole, inventory system of that, so that nothing was lost and they didn't show up on site. They didn't have a tool. They had to go to Canadian Tire. They had to go to a store and buy it or whatever, right? Like it solved huge issues. All I did was say, hey, you got a tool bin? Yeah, let's strap it to a 2x10. Okay, everything goes back in there. Who's accountable? Somebody raises their hand. Good. You're going to check and make sure all the tools got back in the bin at the end of the day? Yeah, good. Doom. Done. Right? And then apply that to all the trucks. Right?
Yeah, so thank you for this talks today. It's very good because you're just showing by example that overachiever is not something to be afraid of. We're because I also love over achievements and to be a performer. So, and you are being a sport person. So actually this is a normal mentality. Not all of us are wired the same, but we
Yeah.
are all normal people. So some are born to be overachievers and like it and enjoy it, and it's normal part of life. And
Sure. And then hang around with more people like that and bring them into your environment. And then you can have a really good time instead of, every once in a while saying, oh, that guy again, or that girl, or that problem. No, right? You deal with it fast and rip the band-aid off and go, right? Get out of there, right? Just deal with it, right? I know it's a problem though, because then you're like, I now have a void. I need to hire somebody and train them up. But is that sacrifice, can you handle that more than keeping the same person on for 10 years? Like if you wouldn't work with somebody for 10 years, don't work with them for a day. That's my principle. Right? So, I know high standards, but if you want to have a big business, build a dream team. Right? So,
or if you have big dreams, because a lot of people just have the big dreams, but then, oh, I need to have also big standards. I need to have also
yeah.
overachievement mentality and so on and so on. So everything requires the
Yeah.
condition in order to be able to happen. Yeah. Thank you very much for today's talk. It's really nice. It's really interesting. It is not something that we thought we were going to talk about, but this is how reality works. So
That's
I
right.
hope
Yeah.
it's helping the people around. And yeah, if you want, in the end, you can say something about you and more. So you're basically helping people with their performance in the businesses.
Yeah, scaling their businesses. So, yeah, if they want to check me out, they can go to lefavecoaching.com. If they want to, this planner that I have that I alluded to, they just go to lefavecoaching.com/focus. And then they can grab that. Or just check me out on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Dan LeFave. So, yeah, it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. I'm going to get going, though, because my other call's waiting. So,
Yeah.
all right.
Always informing. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Take care. Bye for now.